when we talk about authenticity and really owning who we are, right? And most people are guilty at some point in their life and not being exactly authentic to who they are. And all of us guilty as charged. But then when we really do tap into that frequency, and I heard something recently that I thought was really good because you hear, frequency and everything is frequency, and it's used so much now that it has now mindfully it has unbelievable amounts of accuracy. It's true,
Right.
I'm not saying it's not. It is absolutely true. There's frequency to everything and everyone, right? And I think it's important to lock into it. Now the difference is that whether or not you can lock into your frequency, right, which attracts other people that are at a similar frequency. I think that's the other thing. Some people use too drastically matching same frequency. And I think the idea of trying to find people that are on at the exact same frequency is probably illogical. The fact that you want people with complementing frequencies. And I think that's a good way to share it.
I like
right?
that. Yeah, that's a good point.
Frequencies.
Right.
Right. If I happen to be a very intense person, as you know,
yeah.
If I have that intensity, what could complement me in a specific relationship, right? Brother.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I need a little complimenting.
Yeah, that's true.
Of the
little yin and yang.
The Marley, like, hey man. And meanwhile, I'm like, urgency. What are you doing? Like, urgency, let's go.
Hey, we'll get there.
We'll get there. And I'm like,
enjoy the sun.
All right. But now what that'll do is that can bring maybe this a little bit, but that might bring yours a little bit.
Right. True.
You know,
exactly.
It'd be like, man, you know what? He is right, man. We got to go. Let's go.
For sure.
You know so it's this idea of complementing frequencies, and which I think is a very interesting idea.
I like that.
Like, right. So now I did hear somewhere else, and they used a great metaphor, and they said, okay, if you want to understand the frequencies of the universe and personal frequencies, those of us that are old enough to remember the radio.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember the radio? Right? Yep. When you tune the radio. And when you wanted to hear a specific type of music, talk show, sports radio, you would turn to a certain frequency. And it was completely different. So I grew up in New York. Any New Yorkers watching this right now, Hot 97, 97.1, hip-hop station, 98.7, R&B station, right? 103.5, oldies, right? I know these like the top of my, right. So the question is do you know your exact frequency, the channel, and when do you get back there when you need to? And this idea that what you have in your headphones, like when we go to work out later and we know we got love in our headphones,
right.
But somebody else is listening to metal, death, whatever. All right. But at the same time, like, we know the frequency that we're tuned into at that exact moment. So I love this idea of the radio frequency.
Oh yeah.
Figuring out and then be like, like I'm listening to this and you're listening to the same thing, and all of a sudden we're just looking at each other. We don't even hear what's going on.
Facts.
But we know we're listening to. Did you ever pull up to somebody at a red light?
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? You pull up to somebody and look over and they pop into the same beat.
Yeah.
And they looking at they got the same radio station.
Oh yeah. 100%.
Same thing. So now using that metaphor of like owning the radio station that you want to listen to, and then just not letting the other music get into it, and then just finding other people that'll bop into the same beat. You know what I mean? And then finding now, but at the same time, also finding complementing frequencies. Because I think if we only stay one note, I think we're going to be less productive in the world. And I think we're going to achieve less in the world if we only want to interact with people that only like country music. Right? You could like all types of music, but you can also enjoy, it's kind of like Post Malone doing, collabs in the country world, and doing a song with Morgan Wallen and all this other stuff, right? They're just collaborating because they have complementary vibrations. So I think the key there is then to find and own the authenticity of your vibration, and then figuring out what other vibrations complement that, and then what vibrations disrupt your vibration. And if you can figure that out, if you are seafood, if you're shrimp, you're lobster, peanut butter is probably not a good complement to your vibration of being shrimp.
Nope.
So you probably want to stay away from peanut butter. While at the same time, somebody might think like, yeah, this is shrimp, but who would thought rice would complement shrimp?
Right.
Who would think, but maybe not potatoes. You ever have potatoes and shrimp? Not really. Right? When you have shrimp, you might have a little rice, you might have a little pasta, you might have a little, a little white sauce, a little Italian pasta with the shrimp and the scampi.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. But I mean, wouldn't you really think like shrimp and potatoes? It's not really a thing, right? They don't complement each other.
True.
Potatoes in and of themselves are not bad, but I think it's you figuring out what it is that you are, what your vibration is, and finding complementary. I think we overuse this idea that your vibration, your frequency, and that's it, and find your tribe, and they need to be this, and they need to be that. I think you can look at it, I think you can take it one note further and say, yes, that might be the ones you have the most intimate relationships with, comma, if you want to be successful in this world and you want to have great relationships in general, you also have to find those vibrations and frequencies that complement you.
I love that. I really like the complementing aspect of the frequency. I agree with everything that you said, even from the beginning about just authenticity and ownership. That's what you said. I wrote a bunch of notes and I got to the end of control. And I put ownership and control next to each other. And I'm like, okay, in order to be authentic, a lot of people find a lot of joy in showing up as who they feel that they are, right? They're living inside out versus outside in. The perception, I need to show up like how I think I should be perceived based on what's popular, based on being socially accepted, and based on, people pleasing and stuff like that. It always disrupts our spirit. It just doesn't matter. And you can talk to anyone who puts on a lot and tries to receive admiration outside of what they really feel because they really want to show up like this, but they didn't, right? They're always a little disrupted in their spirit. And so the big thing is they're controlling, staying in a space of authenticity.
Okay.
Now, if we don't like who we currently are authentically, then we need to go do a little bit more personal development, a little bit more growth, maybe get out of the limelight. Let's go into isolation. Let's grow a little bit to where we really like our authentic self. So then we can show up and be free. We can breathe easy. We can be free. But it goes back to that control. We have to control the moving components of the world we live in because we live in a windy environment.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you're a leaf, you're going to be tossed around, right? Based on whichever way the wind is going. And so in the space of vibrations and frequencies, we live in that type of a realm, right? And so if we're walking outside like a leaf, and every frequency, every radio station, every person you interact with, everything that you do, see, hear, ingest takes you all over the place. You're no longer in control. And so it's hard to stay authentic if you're not in control because now you might be behaving or acting off of your emotions, right? Because if those frequencies, those waves have manipulated your internal state, now you're responding and showing up based on whatever your internal state, your external state has pushed you to be, a place to push you to whatever place to be. And so I like the complementing frequency because that aspect of yin and yang is very powerful, right? Because then I thought about Spider-Man and I'm like, well, Spider-Man in order to go over here has to send a little web over here and swing. But now if he wants to go back over here, he has to send another web to swing. He's just trying to go in a straight line down the street, but he has to constantly counterbalance himself.
Yeah.
Right? In order to stay in a straight line. And so I think authenticity, in order to stay consistent and show up and for your life to externally eventually be a representation of who you are authentically, then that means you have to stay in that state. We can't be authentic one moment and then acting like this person next, acting like that person next, trying to be popular and cool the next, acting all like this, and expect that in 10-year time, our life is going to reflect who we really are. It's going to reflect everything else. And so I think those complementing frequencies are so important, even like on a radio station, right? But understanding which way we need to pull at what time to stay balanced. And so sometimes, to your point about intensity is great because it comes with the benefit of urgency and getting stuff done and being a fire starter. Like, okay, we need to start a fire. Let's do it right now. Let's not wait, right? The only other thing is it can go a little too high, right? And so sometimes you're trying to stay here, but it may take you a little too high. So now, like our relationship, then you come around me, okay, then I kind of little chill, right? But then you need to still stay
like,
intense.
come on, let's go.
You still need to stay intense, right? And so it's not about coming all the way to my side. No, that doesn't govern you. You're authentically right here, but you don't want to go too high on or either side of the spectrum.
And what might be those complementary relationships in your life that can help you when you're swinging,
or complementary frequencies,
completely.
Because like if you're driving down the road and say you put on one station and then boom, it's got your blood pumping and it's got you aggressive because whatever the song is, the guy's talking about, you know what I'm saying? Whatever, but it's getting you hype. But now, if that's now it's taking you a little too far on this side of the spectrum, that's not going to serve you when you pull up to your job and you need to go in here and be kind and compassionate and social. You know what I mean? You might want to put on that 98, R&B station before you go into work, right? To complement that frequency to get you back in alignment so you can walk in there, feeling groovy and showing up how you want to show up. And then the relationships around you that you establish will be those off of who you've been showing up as an authentic person. Versus this one might have attracted because I was in this state at that moment, or I went out partying and I met this guy because we was in that state, but he don't know this other side of me. So when I see him, it's like we really ain't like that, but we shared a moment of, hey man, we was a groover, you know what I mean, the party, right? You see what I mean? But then it becomes hard to organically grow out of the environment we create because it's all over the place. It's not authentic. But the moment that you take control, and to your point, leveraging those different complementing frequencies to stay aligned, now you're establishing such a foundation, laying solid bricks based on the home that you want to represent yourself as. Because the relationships are going to be culminated and manufactured through you showing up as an authentic human. So whoever connects and gravitate towards you is going to be gravitated towards an authentic component of us. Those relationships last the longest. Those are our best friends. Those are our brothers we call from another mother.
And as they should be, right? I mean, those are going to be those complementing relationships that are going to really, really drive who we are and help us swing to where we need to go. So, look, I couldn't agree more. And it's just figuring out, owning, and if and when it feels uncomfortable when we're in our authenticity, to feel the need to stay there. Now, the caveat to that is this idea of act as if, like carry yourself like you already have it. Carry yourself like you're in a loving relationship. Carry yourself like you are a successful business person. Carry yourself, etc., do the work, right? Because it's sort of the idea of why the book The Secret sold millions and millions of copies, because that's this part. Act as if you already have it. Great, get to work. Right, the book The Secret's talking about acting like you already have it, get to work. Right, Conor McGregor had to carry himself like a champion, had to feel like he was, and when they didn't, he still got to work.
Facts.
Tiger Woods, you know what I mean? Get to work. So I think there's a disconnect in culture that either they're totally locked into vibration and manifestation, and then you have another side that's totally locked into the hustle culture.
Facts.
Right? So how do you find that middle ground of vibration, manifestation, hustle culture, and then putting yourself in the place where you're acting, walking, talking like that future version of yourself, while also putting in the work behind the scenes that no one sees, that's going to get you to that person, right? And that's the balance. And I think our culture has done a great job in presenting each, right? I mean, you will watch Gary Vee and be like, you just want to hustle. You want to do everything all the time. Do more. Goggins, I'ma just go. Great. But how do you figure out what components of both you need to take when locked into your authenticity? They're going to help you get to where you want to go. And I think it's a little bit of the balance of both. And I know that I've been guilty of both. There have been times I'm head down hustle, but then all of a sudden you're not showing up as that person, so you're not presenting yourself in a loving way, and you're not attracting those types of loving people in your life because they're looking at you like some psychopath person that just works until their hands bleed, right? Without that loving side of you, because you're not projecting that. They don't see it. But then you can have the other side of people that are just like, nah, everything is good, everything is great, and they're like, all right, but you keep saying how much you're going to work out, but I don't see any changes. Like, why do you I don't see any changes to your body, even though you've You feel the vibration of like, I'm fit, right? I'm showing up as someone that's fit, but I don't see the muscles. So I think the question is that how do we get a little bit of both to figure out showing up, vibration, finding those that complement us well, and then being able to say urgency, get to work. I think it's got to be a balance of both.
I do too, and I think it's excuse me. I agree with everything. I think early on you kind of talking like modeling behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
We hear so much influence and guidance and advice on if you want to achieve success in life. And I think there's two different goals. I think there's material success, right? Monetary success, financial success. We all know money doesn't buy happiness. Money can eliminate a lot of problems, right? Money can create experience that do generate a lot of joy, peace, and happiness. Money can give you an opportunity to be a giver, to be kind, to give back. That does result in joy and happiness. So it can create opportunities for happiness more abundantly, but it doesn't bring joy and happiness. So I think it goes to more on the spiritual level, right? Who you know you are in your soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we're not showing up authentically who we are, it's because something has swayed that frequency.
I said that it was bad for some reason.
You know what I'm saying? Something has swayed it.
Completely. Something along the way made us think, feel, or imply that who we were, what we, and
Not
things
adequate.
that brought us joy was not adequate, was not enough, was unlovable, unloving, or wrong in some way, shape, or form. Right? And, how do you, and look, I mean, I don't want to get all hokey with the heal word, but, like there's a certain amount of healing that has to be done, and I heard something the other day, a quote that I really loved, and it had to do with men. And, he said, it was Andrew Tate said it. He said, look, you don't find yourself, you forge yourself.
I love that.
And it was like, ooh, man, like that's money right there, because again, and I believe that it's different for men and women, and maybe this is going to be a controversial perspective, but, I really believe that men need to forge themselves and put themselves through intense levels of fire to really, again, the word forge is so good there, while with women, to put them through that fire, if they go through that hardening process, it's very challenging, if not near impossible, to soften back up after that hardening process. And I think that that's just a fact. So he really said it in certain ways to listen. It's not about finding yourself, it's about forging yourself, right? And I do believe that there is a certain amount of healing that still does need to be done with the vast majority of people when it comes down to feeling safe and ready and confident to live in their authenticity. Mm-hmm. And that is then the highest level of vibration that person is capable of doing. Because then what ends up happening is that when they act in their full authenticity, they end up being in a state of joy, which is the reason why with joy and enlightenment and these levels of vibration are so high. And when you're in your authentic self, when you're doing things that thoroughly bring you joy, then you are whatever radio station along the way. But at that point is when you're the loudest. Oh, yeah. And when you're the old school, you ever have the old school with the knob? Yeah. The radios, right? Yeah. And what would happen when you got to 97.0, 96.9? You could hear it a little bit. You could hear the music a little bit. Right?
Just a little bit.
So again, how many of us are just one or two off? How many of us are just, right? You see what I'm saying? All of a sudden, it's like, you might be 97.1, I'm 97.1. And then all of a sudden, it's like, are you living at 96.9? People can hear it. The music's coming out, but it's not clear.
Getting close.
It's not loud.
Getting close.
Right. Exactly. So it's like, how close are we to really? And again, I'm extremely guilty of that myself, but that's all going to be a part of it.
It almost makes me think about how much stuff has been put on you that you have to take off. Mm-hmm. And I think about, children and when you're raising them. Honestly, if you really want to identify what's the authentic nature of this child, you just have to observe them. Let them go out in the grass, let them figure things out and observe the kid. Yep. They'll show you who they are. They know who they are, right? They're learning how to stay alive and they'll show you who they are, right?
Yeah.
And so one thing that I don't think that we highlight enough is how much has been put on us,
Mhm.
right? And so it's a little small whisper of knowing that we feel who we are, being authentic, and then a lot has been put on us. And so I think it's a reason why this is even a conversation, because it's obviously something that's not easy to do. It's not easy to understand. It's not easy to grasp a hold of how to stay in an authentic nature when so much has been put on us. We're confused. We don't know if we're being authentic, but we just have a feeling. And I think that feeling of disruption in your spirit lets you know that you're not quite showing up exactly who you want to be. And here's the deal: we may not know yet. Here's the deal: we may not have enough clarity to truly fully see the full vision of what it is. We see a piece of it, like a puzzle that ain't all put together. And I think the journey of personal growth is like putting a puzzle together. You're finding the missing parts of this puzzle to this picture that you feel like in your mind, you're like, I know this is who I am, but I still got these missing pieces. And that's to your point, those frequencies getting close.
Yep.
And you hear the music, but you ain't quite on it. It's like you're starting to see that picture.
It's interesting, right?
You starting to see that little picture of the puzzle, but there's a couple pieces that's kind of missing. And you're looking for these puzzles to these pieces.
It's like, oh, that makes sense.
Like, oh, okay. And I think that before I think this conversation can be as impactful as it can be, people have to understand where they are with their puzzle. Mm-hmm. It's like before you can show up as this image of what you feel, this blur, mm-hmm. have you done the work to fill in all the gaps to make sure that image is actually whole, so that when you are presenting yourself authentically, it's the whole vision image of exactly what you wanted. And I think in order to do that, we have to pay attention to what's been put on us through the walk of our life and understand some people different than others. Some have less to take off, some have more to take off. But let's figure out, what do we have to take off that was put on us unintentionally without our knowing. And the last point would be foundation building and self-respect.
Right.
And anytime you're in a position to where you are re-establishing your foundation, and has to go through a reconstructive process of break it down to build new. And the longer you go in life, the more you've been building on this slat of land. And so it's painful to say, man, I done spent 20, 30 years building this slat of land, and the foundation's bad, and as soon as the storm come through, it's going to get knocked over. I got to tear it down and rebuild.
Yep.
You know how long that took?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people aren't willing to do the groundwork to reestablish the foundation so they can start building a home that they actually want to live in versus one that they don't want to be in, right?
And that's what we're born into.
And that's pain.
Sure.
And what I'm saying, the breakdown of the foundation comes through pain. But to your point about men need to be forged, women can spend time finding themselves, however, I know you put it a certain way. I think that comes from the self-respect that men receive from what we are able to endure while we're building ourselves up. We pride ourselves on enduring, right? Back when we look at warriors, he had the most success in the battlefield. That doesn't mean he had a great time. That means he fought the most, right? He handled his business the most. He probably endured the most pain, the most sacrifice. He didn't go and have a good time. He stayed out there. He didn't take a breather. He was still doing this thing. He didn't retreat and go home with his family. He went and fought battle after battle after battle after war after war after war. That man holds his head highly, and other people respect him highly, and you receive that, and you have big self-respect, and you show up differently. And so I think the enduring process of being forged through the sacrifice and through the grit, I think establishes self-respect that just carries through your aura, through your essence, through the way you talk, through the way you walk, and the way you show up. I think a lot of times pain is something that we should not run from. I think the pain that is presented in front of us, that is going to cause the discomfort in the moment, I think is exactly what's going to allow us that self-respect and confidence on the back end to keep moving forward. And I think the feeling of either fear, intimidation, insecurity, lack, whatever it is that makes us not go through that pain at that moment, I think then retracts everybody in their mind to go into the spiral of guilt, defeat, lack, all that type of stuff. Yeah. I think it's all about the courage we take when we're faced at the next point in that pivot of finding that next puzzle piece, breaking down that next brick, right? That pain, that discomfort, that sacrifice. If we can endure that, I think that's what stirs up that strong foundation and confidence of a man, so we can show up. You know,
completely. I mean, it's often said, confidence is memory of past successes, right? Like, how are you confident to take the shot? You've taken the shot 1,000 times, right? But we just got to keep taking more shots on top of more shots. But then even noting that, self-respect. A person can't give what they don't have. And if you don't have self-respect, you can't give respect. And if you weren't raised to respect yourself and you act and behave in ways that are lacking respect towards yourself and others and people around you, then it's going to be hard to be able to expect that. And then the question is, do you expect respect because you know you're respectable? And I think that's when you work with people that in their minds, they're not making eye contact with you, something's up. Like maybe they know in their heart that they're not respectable people. And how do you be able to discern that when you're interacting with them? But again, forging yourself through it, putting yourself, in the fire intentionally and forging who it is that you want to become. I think that that's the main point of everything that we're saying is like forging yourself into the version of yourself that regardless of whatever wind comes, you won't be broken.
Facts.
You might sway, but you won't be broken. There's an old metaphor that's saying like willow trees live longer than oak trees, right? Where it's like the willow might be moving with things. The oak tree's like, this is who I am. This is how it's going. So you might need to be able to have some flexibility.
Great point.
But that strength is there. The strength is there in knowing who you are, in knowing what you bring to the table, in knowing that behind closed doors, you are who you say you are. You present yourself in certain ways. You know how to handle situations. And again, I think that all of that comes with life experiences for men to forge into that version. And whether or not that was given at a young age to children, I think that that's from an authenticity perspective. I think it's shamed out of kids at a very young age. You see it all the time. Don't do this, don't do that. Let's put 30 kids in a room and everyone has to behave a certain way in order for them to get accepted and for them to get, what they need, which in that situation is approval and grades. So they need grades, they need this, so they end up having to behave in a certain way. But again, imagine having 30 animals in one room and saying, you need to bark like a dog. And he's like, but I'm a cat. Like, you could train a cat to bark, I guess, but eventually, it's not going to be the same. But you understand the metaphor, right? Of like, it's just like trying to make this one room full of animals that specific animal. And some are going to bark great because they're dogs. But then there are others that there's like, look, no matter how much you try and get me to bark, maybe I can do it. But then after a while, it's not going to help me be the best giraffe I could be. And then you end up not even becoming a giraffe, right? So letting children be able to develop their authenticity, owning our authenticity, looking in the mirror, those people that are faith, figuring out what makes us childlike.
Right, true.
I think that's the whole point of that statement in the Bible, of figuring out what legitimately brings you joy,
right,
locked into and aligned with your authenticity. So how do you align with that authenticity to find what brings you joy, to figure out how you can serve the world with what brings you joy based on the skills and the capabilities that you've developed because of the talent that God gave you. So how do you take your God-given talent, develop the skills that are necessary to take your gift, unwrap that motherfucker, and use it to serve the world with? And at the end of the day, forge yourself into the man you're meant to be, and be, the head of the house. To be your modern day Don.
Hey, my man.
That's how we end.
Yes.